point about Ukraine was very simple. The Russian Federation, so long as it was run, so long as Soviet Union was run by Gorbachev, it was, the West had a free ride. So long as it was run by Yeltsin, the West also had a free ride. Now, in Gorbachev's case, he mistook the West for friends, and let us say you mistake the man who wants you to be destroyed as your best friend, and you rely on him for help and assistance, and you basically surrender your advantages to him. Well, it may not be the smartest thing to do, but poor Gorbachev believed that, and he did it. Yeltsin did not do it because he believed that. He did it because he was controlled by a mafia, and that mafia was strongly influenced by the Western powers. They used that mafia to ensure that Yeltsin basically did their bidding, and in many situations, did their bidding by not doing anything when they used to make interventions which harmed Russia significantly, such as the eastward expansion of NATO, such as the bombing of Serbia in order to detach the province of Kosovo, which was done through bombing for about 200 days. I'm not very sure if possibly the Americans were not aware that Serbia was an independent sovereign entity. They may not have been aware of that for some reason. They may have probably thought it was not sovereign in some way. But the fact is that this has been happening across the world. But the other point is the reaction to Gorbachev and Yeltsin among the Soviet, not only the Soviet people, but the Soviet nomenclatura. That is, people who were influential during the Soviet Union, and many of whom, like Vladimir Putin, for example, continued to be influential in the period when it was replaced by the Russian Federation, were horrified by what they saw as the damage done to long-term Russian interests by first Gorbachev and then Yeltsin. They wanted somebody entirely different. And I don't know, by one means or the other, they persuaded Yeltsin's family that it was in their best interest to promote a gentleman named Vladimir Putin as the vice president of Russia. Now, a lot of hullabaloo is being made by the US media, by European media, by UK media, in particular in Europe. UK has been even more, if I may say so, high decibel than the US, where Putin and Russia are concerned, but about Putin being a spy master suddenly taking over a country. George H.W. Bush, the president who when we began the story with him, he was the director of the CIA. He was DCIA. And after that, his next government job was vice president of the United States. His first government job, I think, was DCIA. His next government job was vice president of the United States. And the next government job was president of the United States. After he ceased to become president, he never held a government job until he passed away. And I must confess, he was a brilliant guy, absolutely brilliant, and way more skilled as a tactician than his son, who was clueless in many ways, ever was. But I'd like to point out that this is one point. Second point, which again, this situation really became very bad for the Russian-speaking population. Now, in Crimea, for example, you have Sevastopol, which is a very, very important naval port for Russia. And you had a gentleman called Petro Poroshenko, who was essentially telling that Russians should get out of the Crimea, and we can make Sevastopol a NATO base because I'd like to join NATO, and I'd like to put my country in NATO and the European Union. Now, frankly, it was a dagger pointed at the security heart of Russia. As far as India is concerned, quite frankly, in the past, before Modi, there have been governments that did not care if there was a dagger that reached the very heart of the country's security. But Putin was a different kettle of fish altogether. Now, coming from St. Petersburg, Putin initially tried to be friendly with the Europeans. Putin regarded himself, like Gorbachev, like Yeltsin, as being European. But I don't regard Russians as European. They are uniquely Eurasian. They're neither European nor Asian, they're Eurasian. The one Eurasian country in the world is Russia. But I think President Putin believed in the common European home, which was a fiction Gorbachev fell for. And he tried to join NATO. He asked to join NATO. He asked to join possibly the EU. And of course, they said very, very calmly, President Putin's no way. The fact is, he should have learned that before by Clinton's treatment of Russia under Yeltsin, because Clinton completely tried to pastoralize Russia, make Russia an agricultural country, to denude it of its technology, of its industries, so that it would permanently be not a second class, but a third class citizen. And had somebody like Yeltsin come, they would have succeeded in that, than the third person. Fortunately for those who did not want that to happen, Putin turned up. So after 5 or 6 years of going by the Gorbachev line, never the Yeltsin line, of a common European home, Putin eventually realized that, sorry, this is not going to work. The West is never going to accept us. And I had been writing even at that point in time, Germany and France, for example, they would never accept Russia in the EU, because then the Franco-German alliance would lose its domination. The UK would never accept it. I mean, no other European country would accept Russia in the EU. It was a fantasy of the Russian leadership and their Euro preferences. But finally, I think Putin got the message. What happened? You had if I'm again not mistaken, 2008, there was a President Saakashvili in Georgia, another former Soviet state. And this state is also pretty critical to Russian security. Not as much as Ukraine, but critical, let me say. And he said, again, he started making, overtures to NATO. They started responding in private. And let me tell you one thing, Sharon, there is no such thing as private in today's world. I mean, even if you don't have a smartphone, there are umpteen ways of ensuring that what you speak in the privacy of your bedroom is recorded by some technologically enabled country or the other. Certainly, the United States has the capacity, Russia has the capacity, China has the capacity. I think I'm confident that under Prime Minister Modi, India is building that capacity. We are getting close to that capacity. But this is the point. So, there's no point saying in public, no, that, NATO is not interested. If in private, the NATO leaders have been saying, no, we will join these guys. Let's wait and see if when Putin softens the way Yeltsin had softened. And then we'll ensure that NATO takes over Georgia and then Ukraine. This would have been a very heavy blow to Russian security. Putin immediately acted, detached two properties of Georgia, two territories of Georgia, which were basically as an example to Georgia that, look, you can't get away. Eventually we are there and we'll come in and we'll occupy you. And they were going to do that when the Georgians finally cried uncle. And now the Georgian dream of joining NATO is up in smoke. Because if Georgia is admitted into NATO or the European Union, there will be a war with Russia, with NATO, by NATO and the European Union. Russia will not tolerate it. So that was an example. Right. Then Ukraine, as I recall, in 2014, you had a gentleman who was a billionaire by Ukrainian standards, a chap called Petro Poroshenko, who also had the same dream of joining his country to NATO, of becoming a part of the European Union. And I think, according to the information that reached the Kremlin, which was correct or not, I don't know, and whether my information is correct or not. After all, I don't know what's going on in the Kremlin. I don't know what's going on in South Bloc. I don't know what's going on in the White House. I know very little. I don't know what's going on in Zhongnanhai in China. I don't know what's going on anywhere because I'm completely outside the government. I have no role in government at all. And I don't believe too many people in government take me seriously. But I must confess that it's therefore, I mean, friends like you do, but I don't think anyone in government does. But having said that, I think it was very clear to the Kremlin that this country was Poroshenko was going the Saakashvili way. And they acted. Once again, they acted. And how do they act? They detached Crimea from the rest of Ukraine. They detached some eastern territories from the rest of Ukraine. They took nibbles, not really bites, because the entire oblast, the districts were not annexed. About 1/3 of the district of each of the two districts of the eastward side of Ukraine were annexed as a lesson to the Ukrainians. Don't fool around with us, because if you do, we'll eat you up alive. Well, I was under the impression after that NATO would be sensible, that whoever leads Ukraine will be sensible. But I mean, as it happens, a gentleman whose main professional competence has been in comedy is now participating in, I'm sorry to say, not a comedy, but a terrible tragedy for his people. A terrible tragedy. What the Ukrainian people are facing today is a tragedy. And you're perfectly right. It has been caused by the Russian entry into large parts of Ukraine. And it is reaching a stage in which the Russian army is going to occupy the whole of Ukraine. They've already taken care of any air protection they have, naval protection. Now it's gone. The army will be next. So it is horrible pain. But, it was predictable pain. Putin telegraphed in public many times exactly what were his red lines and exactly what he was going to do. And it was clear that he was going to repeat the 2014 experience and the 2008 experience with Georgia. Only the 2014 experience was an initial warning. And the next time around, it would be a complete invasion. That's exactly what happened.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.